The morning sun shone through the crystal walls of the great palace on Viridian Prime. Lady Kira Thess stood at her window, looking out at the purple mountains in the distance. Today was supposed to be a happy day. Today was the day before her wedding. But she felt no joy in her heart. Her scales were a soft blue-green color, marking her as a member of the noble class. She was young, only 25 in human years, and she had dreams of seeing other worlds and studying the strange life forms that lived among the stars. But tomorrow, all of those dreams would end. A knock came at her door. "Come in," she said, in a quiet voice. Her mother, Lady Morthus, entered the room. Her scales were darker, showing her age and wisdom. "My daughter, you must prepare for the ceremony. The dressmakers are here." Kira Thess turned away from the window. "Mother, I do not want this marriage. Commander Vexhorn is cruel. He treats his servants badly. How will he treat a wife?" Her mother's eyes grew sad, but her voice stayed firm. "Child, this is not about what you want. This marriage will save our family. Our mining rights will be safe. Our people will have work. Sometimes, we must put duty before our own wishes." 3 female servants entered the room, carrying a heavy white dress covered in crystals. It was beautiful, but to Kira Thess it looked like a prison uniform. The dress was made in the old style, with long sleeves that would cover her arms completely. Once she wore it and spoke the marriage words, she would belong to her husband. She would have no rights of her own. In the next room, important guests were arriving for the pre-wedding meetings. Kira Thess could hear their voices through the walls. Most were Zephyrians like herself, but she heard other voices too. Some were from the bird-like Aryan race. Others belonged to the tall, thin people from the ice world of Korvash. Then she heard a voice that was different from all the others. It was deeper than most, but softer than a Zephyrian male's voice. She had never heard anything like it before. "That must be the human," one of the servants whispered as she held up the dress. "Human?" Kira Thess asked. "Yes, my lady. A human diplomat came with the trade delegation. They say humans are a new race. They only joined the galactic community 50 years ago." Kira Thess had heard of humans, but she had never seen one. Her teachers said they were a weak species from a small world. They had no natural weapons, no thick skin, and they lived very short lives. But they had somehow built powerful ships and joined the Great Galactic Council. The fitting took 2 hours. The dress was tight and heavy. When it was done, Kira Thess felt like she could barely move. The servants left, and she sat alone in her room thinking about her future. That evening, there was a great feast for all the wedding guests. Kira Thess had to sit at the high table next to Commander Vexhorn. He was a large male, even for a Zephyrian. His scales were dark red, almost black, and his eyes were cold. He spoke to the other males about hunting and war, but he never spoke to her. Across the room, she saw the human for the first time. He was much smaller than she had expected. His skin was smooth and tan-colored with no scales at all. His hair was dark brown and his eyes were a strange blue color. He wore a simple blue uniform with silver markings. The human was talking to Elder Korthak, one of the most important judges in the Empire. But he kept looking toward the high table. When his eyes met hers, Kira Thess felt something strange. The human's face showed concern, as if he was worried about her. During the meal, Elder Korthak stood up to speak. "Honored guests, we gather to celebrate the joining of 2 great houses. House Veltar and House Mordak will be united through this marriage. The young lady Kira Thess will bring honor to her new family." The human stood up suddenly. "Excuse me, Elder Korthak. May I ask a question?" The room became quiet. It was unusual for an outsider to speak during such a ceremony. "You may speak, Captain Morrison," the elder said. "Has the lady been asked if she wants this marriage?" Several Zephyrians laughed. Commander Vexahorn's eyes grew angry. "What a strange question, human. What does want have to do with duty?" Captain Morrison looked directly at Kira Thess. "On my world, we believe that marriage should be a choice made by both people. Has Lady Kira Thess chosen this?" Elder Korthak waved his hand dismissively. Human, your people are young and do not understand our ways. Marriage is about family honor and practical matters. Love and choice are ideas for children and poets. But she is a person, not property, the human said. His voice was calm, but there was strength in it. She has thoughts and feelings and dreams of her own. Commander Vexhorn stood up, his large frame towering over the table. Human, you speak of things you do not understand. This female will be well cared for. She will have a home and protection. What more could she want? Captain Morrison looked at Kirithis again. Perhaps we should ask her. All eyes turned to Kirithis. In her entire life, no one had ever asked her what she wanted in front of others. Her heart began to beat faster. She wanted to speak, to tell them about her dreams, but the words would not come. You see? Commander Vexhorn said with a laugh. She knows her place, she is content. But Captain Morrison was still looking at her. His blue eyes were kind and patient. Kirithis realized that he really did want to know what she thought. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small spark of hope. The feast continued, but Kirithis barely ate. She kept thinking about the human's words. Marriage should be a choice. What a strange idea. But it made her heart feel lighter just to think about it. Later that night, as she lay in her bed, she wondered what would happen if someone really did ask her what she wanted. What would she say? She knew the answer, but she had never dared to speak it aloud. She wanted to be free. Captain Jake Morrison could not sleep that night. He kept thinking about the look in Lady Kirithes's eyes during the feast. It was the look of someone trapped, someone who had given up hope. He had seen that look before, on other worlds, in other situations where people had no choice in their own lives. Jake sat at his small desk in the guest quarters, reading through files on his portable computer. He was learning about Zephyrian law and customs. The more he read, the more troubled he became. According to Zephyrian law, a married female had no legal rights. She could not own property. She could not speak in court. She could not even leave her husband's house without permission. It was like reading about ancient history from his own world, from times when humans had similar laws. But there was something else in the old laws, something that caught his attention. It was called the right of alternative suitor. If another, being of equal or greater standing, offered to marry the bride before the ceremony, the original marriage could be challenged. Jake read the law again carefully. It was very old, from a time when marriages were often challenged between rival houses. The law was still valid, but it had not been used in over 200 years. The problem was clear. Humans were not considered equal to Zephyrians in their society. Jake was a ship captain and a diplomat, but in Zephyrian eyes he was still from a lesser species. The next morning, Jake went to see Admiral Lisa Carter on the human ship Endeavor. The ship was docked at the orbital station above Viridian Prime. Admiral Carter was a tough woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been in space for 30 years and had seen many strange things. "Admiral, I need to ask for something unusual," Jake said as he entered her office. "Let me guess. This is about the Zephyrian wedding," she said without looking up from her reports. "Yes, ma'am. I want to challenge the marriage." Admiral Carter put down her reports and looked at him. "Captain, we are here as guests. We cannot interfere in their customs, no matter how much we dislike them. But Admiral, they signed the Galactic Accord on Sentient Rights. That accord says all intelligent beings have the right to choose their own path in life. This marriage violates that agreement." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled up the accord on her computer and read through it. "You are right, Captain, they did sign this. But challenging their customs could damage our relations with the Zephyrian Empire. With respect, Admiral, what kind of relations? Do we want with people who treat half their population as property?" Admiral Carter stood up and walked to the window that looked out at the planet below. "Captain, I have a daughter back on Earth. She's about the same age as that Zephyrian girl. If someone tried to force her into a marriage..." She turned back to Jake. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I want to invoke the right of alternative suitor. I want to offer myself as an alternative husband for Lady Kirithis." "That is the craziest thing I have heard in years," the Admiral said. But then she smiled. "It might actually work. Do you really want to marry this girl? I want to give her a choice, Jake said. If she chooses to marry me, it will be a partnership, not ownership. She will keep all her rights. She can pursue her dreams. And if she decides she does not want to marry anyone, I will help her find a way to be free. Admiral Carter nodded slowly. I will support you, Captain, but you know this will not be easy. The Zephyrians will not accept this challenge easily. That afternoon, Jake returned to the palace. He requested a meeting with Elder Korthak and the other judges. The meeting was held in the Great Hall, where the wedding was supposed to take place the next day. Elder Korthak sat on a high chair made of crystal. Around him were 6 other judges, all old males with dark scales. Commander. Vexhorn stood to one side, his arms crossed. Human Captain, Elder Korthak said, what brings you before this court? Jake stepped forward. He had changed into his formal dress uniform. The blue fabric was crisp and his silver captain's bars shone in the light. Honored judges, I come to invoke an ancient right under Zephyrian law. What right is this? Asked Judge Velmorak. The right of alternative suitor. I formally request to be considered as an alternative husband for Lady Kirathis of House Veltar. The hall erupted in shocked voices. Some of the judges laughed. Commander Vexhorn's face grew dark with anger. This is impossible, Vexhorn shouted. You are not even Zephyrian. The law does not say the suitor must be Zephyrian, Jake replied calmly. It says the suitor must be of equal or greater standing. Elder Korthak raised his hand for silence. Human, our records show that your species is classified as a lesser race. You do not have the standing to make this challenge. Jake had expected this. Honored Elder, I disagree. Humans have been accepted into the Galactic Council. We have diplomatic relations with over 50 species. We have contributed to galactic science and trade. How can we be considered lesser when we sit as equals in the galactic government? The judges whispered among themselves. Jake could see that his words had made them think. Even if you had the standing, Judge Velmorak said, you would have to prove your worthiness in combat against Commander Vexhorn. Do you really think you could defeat him? Jake looked at Commander Vexhorn. The Zephyrian was at least 2 feet taller than him and probably weighed twice as much. His natural armor plating would protect him from most attacks. I accept the challenge, Jake said. Commander Vexhorn laughed. Human, I will break you in half. At that moment, a soft voice spoke from the back of the hall. I wish to hear this challenge. Everyone turned. Lady Kirathis stood in the doorway. She was wearing a simple blue dress, and her scales seemed to shine in the sunlight coming through the windows. Daughter, you should not be here, Elder Korthak said. With respect, honored judges, this concerns my future. Do I not have the right to hear what is being said? The judges looked uncomfortable. Technically, she did have the right to observe legal proceedings that involved her. Very well, Elder Korthak said, but you will not speak unless asked. Kirathis bowed and took a seat in the back of the hall. Jake turned to face her. Lady Kirathis, if I am successful in this challenge, I want you to know that the choice will still be yours. I will not force you to marry me or anyone else. For the first time since Jake had met her, Kirathis spoke clearly and strongly. Captain Morrison, I accept your right to make this challenge. Commander Vexhorn's eyes blazed with fury. This is madness. I demand immediate satisfaction. Elder Korthak nodded gravely. Very well. The combat trial will take place tomorrow, at noon in the Great Arena. If Captain Morrison wins, he may court Lady Kirathis. If he loses... The elder did not finish the sentence, but everyone knew what it meant. As the meeting ended, Jake caught Kirathis's eye. She gave him the smallest nod, and he saw something in her expression that had not been there before. Hope. The great arena of Viridian Prime had not seen a trial by combat in 50 years. Now thousands of Zephyrians filled the crystal seats, their scales glittering in the afternoon sun. News of the challenge had spread across the planet and beyond. Ships from other worlds had come to watch the strange spectacle of a human challenging a Zephyrian warrior. Jake stood in the preparation chamber beneath the arena. Admiral Carter was with him, along with Dr. Amy Foster, the ship's medical officer. Amy was checking Jake's equipment one last time. "Your armor is light, but it should protect you from most cuts," she said. "Remember, Zephyrians are strong, but they get tired faster than humans. If you can last long enough, you might have a chance." "The whole galaxy is watching this," Admiral Carter said. "Win or lose, you have already made people think about their customs." Jake nodded. He was nervous, but he was also determined. He thought about Kira Thess and the hopeless look in her eyes. Today, he would give her a chance at freedom, or he would die trying. In the other preparation chamber, Commander Vexhorn was putting on his ceremonial armor. The metal plates were black and red, decorated with symbols of his military victories. His weapons were a traditional Zephyrian sword and a small shield. Elder Korthak's voice echoed through the arena. "Citizens of the Empire, we gather today to witness an ancient trial. Captain Jake Morrison of the human race challenges Commander Vexhorn for the right to court Lady Kira Thess of House Veltar." The crowd cheered, but it was not a friendly sound. Most of them wanted to see the human defeated. They saw this challenge as an insult to their way of life. "The rules are simple," Elder Korthak continued. "The fight continues until one warrior yields or cannot continue. The winner will be judged not only on victory but on the honor shown in battle." Jake walked out onto the arena floor. The sand was white and soft under his feet. He wore light armor and carried a human military sword and a small energy shield. Compared to Vexhorn's impressive appearance, he looked small and weak. Commander Vexhorn entered from the other side. The crowd roared as he raised his sword high. He was massive, standing over 8 feet tall, his natural armor plating covered. His arms and chest and his red scales seemed to glow with anger. In the royal viewing box, Lady Kira Thess sat with the judges and other nobles. Her hands were folded in her lap, but Jake could see that they were shaking slightly. She was afraid, but not just for him. She was afraid of what would happen to her if he lost. "Begin," Elder Korthak called. Vexhorn charged immediately, his heavy sword swinging in a wide arc. Jake rolled to the side, barely avoiding the blow. The Zephyrian sword struck the sand where Jake had been standing, sending up a cloud of white dust. "Satio," crowd cheered for Vexhorn. They expected the fight to be over quickly, but Jake had studied Zephyrian fighting styles during the night. He knew that they preferred direct attacks and overwhelming force. They were not used to opponents who moved quickly and unpredictably. Vexhorn attacked again, this time with a series of powerful overhead strikes. Jake blocked what he could with his shield and dodged the rest. Each blow that hit his shield sent shocks through his arm, but he did not fall. "Stand still and fight like a warrior," Vexhorn shouted. But Jake continued to move, staying just out of reach of the heavier weapon. He struck back when he could, quick cuts that found gaps in Vexhorn's armor. None of his attacks were serious wounds, but they began to add up. After 10 minutes of fighting, Vexhorn was breathing hard. Zephyrians were strong, but their heavy build made them tire quickly in long fights. Jake, meanwhile, was just getting warmed up. Human endurance was something that amazed other species. The crowd began to grow quiet. This was not going the way they had expected. Vexhorn changed his strategy. Instead of wild swings, he began to use more careful attacks. He was a skilled warrior, and once he stopped trying to end the fight quickly, he became much more dangerous. One of his thrusts got past Jake's guard and cut through the armor on his shoulder. Blood began to flow and the crowd cheered again. But Jake did not slow down. He continued to move, continued to strike back. On Earth, humans had learned to hunt animals much larger and stronger than themselves. They did it through persistence, intelligence, and the refusal to give up. 20 minutes into the fight, both warriors were wounded and tired. Vexhorn's armor was damaged in several places, and his breathing was labored. Jake's left arm was not working properly, but he switched his sword to his right hand and kept fighting. Then Vexhorn made a mistake. He swung his sword too hard and lost his balance for just a moment. Jake saw his chance and struck, his blade finding a gap in the armor at Vexhorn's knee. The Zephyrian warrior fell to one knee. His sword dropped in the sand. Jake could have ended the fight then, He could have put his sword to Vexhorn's throat and demanded surrender. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone in the arena. He stepped back and extended his hand to help Vexhorn stand up. "The fight is over," Jake said. "I do not need to hurt you more." Vexhorn stared at the offered hand. In Zephyrian culture, showing mercy to a defeated enemy was a sign of weakness. But as he looked into Jake's eyes, he saw something different. He saw strength that did not need to prove itself through cruelty. Slowly, Vexhorn reached up and took Jake's hand. Jake helped him to his feet. The arena was completely silent. No one knew what to think about what they had just seen. Elder Korthak stood up in the royal box. His old voice was shaky as he spoke. "I have seen many battles in my long life, but I have never seen anything like this. Captain Morrison, you have won not through the defeat of your opponent, but through the demonstration of character." The crowd began to murmur. Some were confused, others were impressed. They had come to see violence, but they had witnessed something entirely different. According to the ancient laws, Elder Korthak continued, "Captain Morrison has earned the right to court Lady Kirithess. But before we continue, there is something that must be asked." The elder turned to Kirithess. "Lady Kirithess of House Veltar, you have remained silent through these proceedings, but now you must speak. Do you accept this human's suit?" All eyes turned to Kirithess. She stood up slowly, her blue-green scales catching the light. For a moment, she looked at Commander Vexhorn, who was being helped from the arena by his servants. Then she looked at Jake, who stood in the center of the arena, bleeding but victorious. "Honored judges," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I accept Captain Morrison's right to court me, and I would like to learn more about the human way of marriage where both people have a choice." The arena erupted in noise. Some Zephyrians were angry, others were curious. But in the royal box, Elder Korthak was smiling. "It seems," he said to the other judges, "that we have much to learn about these humans." Jake looked up at Kirithess and saw something in her face that had not been there before. She was no longer the frightened girl who had sat silently at dinner. She was a woman who had found her voice. And for the first time since he had made this crazy challenge, Jake allowed himself to smile. 3 days after the combat trial, Jake sat in the palace gardens with Lady Kirithess. His shoulder was healing well thanks to Dr. Foster's medical treatment. Kirithess had asked to speak with him privately, away from the eyes of the court and the whispers of the nobles. The garden was beautiful, filled with crystal flowers that chimed softly in the breeze. But Jake could see that Kirithess was nervous. She kept looking around as if she expected someone to tell her she was not allowed to be there. "Captain Morrison," she said quietly, "I must ask you something that has been troubling me. Please, call me Jake and ask me anything you want. Why did you do this? Why did you risk your life for someone you barely know?" Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain. "On my world, we believe that every person has the right to choose their own path. When I saw you at that dinner, I saw someone who had never been given that choice. I could not just walk away. But you could have been killed. Commander Vexhorn is one of our best warriors. Yes, I could have died. But some things are worth the risk." Kirithess touched one of the crystal flowers, making it ring like a small bell. "I have been thinking about what you said, about marriage being a choice. This is a very strange idea to me." "Tell me about your dreams," Jake said. "What did you want to do before this marriage was arranged?" Her eyes lit up for the first time since he had met her. "I wanted to study the life forms on other worlds. There are creatures that live in the gas clouds around stars, and others that swim in the liquid methane lakes of the outer moons. I have read about them in books, but I have never seen them myself. That sounds like xenobiology. We have scientists on Earth who study the same things." "Really? Your people allow females to be scientists?" "Of course. Some of our best scientists are women. In fact, Dr. Foster, who treated my wounds, she is one of the leading experts on alien physiology in human space." Kirithess stared at him in amazement. "She is a healer and a scientist, and she is allowed to travel between worlds?" not just allowed. She is encouraged. Her work has helped us understand dozens of different species. They talked for hours. Jake told her about Earth, about human cities and schools, and the freedom that people had to choose their own careers. Kirithes told him about her secret studies, the books she had hidden in her room, and the observations she had made of the crystal creatures that lived in the palace walls. As the days passed, more people came to visit. Admiral Carter arrived, with Dr. Foster and Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Hayes, who commanded the human Marines on the Endeavor. They all spoke with Kirithes, sharing stories about their lives and careers. Dr. Foster was especially interested in Kirithes's knowledge of crystal-based life forms. "These observations are incredible," she said, looking through Kirithes's hidden notes. "You have discovered things that our scientists have been trying to understand for years." "But I am not a real scientist," Kirithes said. "I have no training, no credentials." "Knowledge is knowledge," Dr. Foster replied. "Training can be learned. What you have is the most important thing: curiosity and the ability to see what others miss." Word of the conversations began to spread through the palace. Other young Zephyrian women started asking questions about human customs. They wanted to know if human females really could choose their own husbands, or if they could choose not to marry at all. Lady Morthis, Kirithes's mother, came to visit Jake one evening. She looked worried and tired. "Captain Morrison, I am grateful for what you have done for my daughter, but I must ask, what will happen to her if she goes with you? Will she be safe among your people?" "Lady Morthis, I can promise you that she will be treated with respect and kindness. If she chooses to come with us, she will have every opportunity to pursue her studies. She will never be forced to do anything against her will. And if she chooses not to marry you, then I will still help her find a way to be free. Maybe she can become a student at one of our universities or a researcher with our science teams. The choice will be hers." The older woman was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "When I was young, I had dreams too. I wanted to be a musician. But I was told that music was not practical, not useful for a noble house. I have wondered for 40 years what my life might have been like if I had been allowed to choose." Meanwhile, the rest of the galaxy was watching with great interest. News reports were being broadcast on dozens of worlds. The story of the human who challenged an entire empire's marriage customs was spreading far beyond the Zephyrian system. Elder Korthak called for a meeting of the High Council. Jake was invited to speak about human marriage customs and laws. The old judges listened carefully as he explained concepts that were foreign to them. "So, among your people, a marriage can end if both parties agree?" asked Judge Velmarak. "Yes. We believe that forcing people to stay together when they are unhappy helps no one. And women can own property and speak in courts. They can own property, run businesses, serve as judges themselves. Some of our greatest leaders have been women," the judges whispered among themselves. These ideas challenged everything they had been taught about proper society. "Captain Morrison," Elder Korthak said, "you have given us much to think about. But tell me this. If Lady Kirithes chooses to marry you, how do we know you will keep your promises? How do we know you will not treat her as property once you are away from here?" Jake stood up and looked around the room at all the judges. "You will know because she will tell you herself. I propose that we create a communication link between Earth and Viridian Prime. Lady Kirithes can speak with her family whenever she wants. If I break my promises, she can return home immediately." This was another shocking idea. In traditional Zephyrian marriage, the bride's family had no contact with her once she left her father's house. That evening, Jake met with Kirithes one more time in the garden. The twin moons were rising, casting strange shadows through the crystal flowers. "I have made my decision," she said. Jake felt his heart beating faster. "What have you decided?" "I want to go with you. I want to see other worlds and study the creatures that live among the stars. But more than that, I want to live in a place where I can choose my own future. Are you sure? Once we leave here, your life will be very different. I am sure. But I have one condition." "What is that?" "I want to learn everything I can about science and exploration. And someday I want to come back here and teach other young women that they have choices too. Jake smiled. I think that can be arranged. As they sat in the garden watching the stars appear in the purple sky, neither of them knew that their conversation was changing history. But across the Zephyrian Empire, young women were already beginning to ask new questions. Questions about choice, about freedom, and about what their lives could become if they had the courage to reach for their dreams. The wedding ceremony took place 1 month later in the Great Hall of the palace, but this was unlike any wedding the Zephyrian Empire had ever seen. Instead of the traditional ceremony where the bride was given away like property, this was something entirely new. Kirithess wore a dress of her own choosing, a simple but elegant gown of blue and silver that allowed her to move freely. Instead of covering her completely, it showed the beautiful patterns of her scales. She walked down the aisle alone, not escorted by her father, because she was making this choice herself. Jake waited for her at the altar, wearing his dress uniform. But he was not alone either. Admiral Carter stood beside him, along with Dr. Foster and Lieutenant Colonel Hayes. They were there to witness that this was a partnership between equals. Elder Korthak performed the ceremony, but the words were different from the ancient vows. Instead of promising obedience, Kirithess and Jake promised to respect each other's dreams and support each other's goals. Instead of Jake claiming ownership, they both promised to share their lives while remaining free individuals. Do you, Kirithess of House Veltar, choose to join your life with Jake Morrison, knowing that this choice is freely made and can be freely changed? I do choose this, Kirithess said, her voice clear and strong. Do you, Jake Morrison of Earth, promise to honor Kirithess as an equal partner and support her right to choose her own path? I do promise this, Jake replied. When they exchanged rings, Kirithess's was not a mark of ownership, but a symbol of partnership. The human rings were designed with small crystals from Viridian Prime and metals from Earth, representing the joining of two worlds and two ways of thinking. But the most important moment came when Jake spoke to the gathered crowd. Friends and honored guests, today we have not just joined two people, but two ideas. The idea that love should be a choice, not a duty. The idea that marriage should be a partnership, not ownership. The idea that every person, regardless of gender or species, has the right to choose their own destiny. The crowd was mixed in their reactions. Some of the older nobles looked disapproving, but many of the younger Zephyrians seemed thoughtful. And in the back of the hall, Jake could see several young women watching with bright, hopeful eyes. After the ceremony, there was a celebration that lasted 3 days. Guests came from across the galaxy to see this historic event. Representatives from dozens of species arrived to witness what many were calling the wedding that changed the universe. During the celebration, something unexpected happened. 3 young Zephyrian women approached Dr. Foster and asked if they could study at human universities. They had heard about the opportunities available to women in human space, and they wanted to learn. Of course, Dr. Foster said. We always welcome new students, especially those with fresh perspectives. One of the women was Lady Cyrilyn, a cousin of Kirithess. I want to study engineering, she said shyly. I have always been interested in how ships fly between the stars. Then you should meet Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, Dr. Foster said. He knows all about starship design. Elder Korthak watched these conversations with great interest. After seeing the results of Jake's challenge, he had been thinking deeply about Zephyrian customs. The old ways had seemed natural and right for centuries, but now he was beginning to question them. On the final day of the celebration, the elder made an announcement that shocked the entire empire. Citizens of Viridian Prime, the events of this past month have shown us that our understanding of marriage and partnership may be incomplete. Therefore, the High Council has decided to review our marriage laws. We will consider reforms that give all citizens more choice in their personal lives. The announcement sent ripples across the galaxy. Other species began to examine their own customs. The Corvassians, who had similar arranged marriage traditions, started discussing reforms. Even the Aryans, who had always prided themselves on their advanced society, began questioning some of their social rules. 6 months later, Jake and Kirithess were living on Earth. Kirithess had enrolled in the Terran Institute of Xenobiology, where she was already making remarkable discoveries. Her unique understanding of crystal-based life forms was revolutionizing the field, but she had not forgotten her promise. Every week she made communication calls back to Viridian Prime, speaking with young women who had questions about their choices. She had become a symbol of what was possible when people were free to choose their own paths. Dr. Foster had taken Kira Thess as her research partner, and together they were studying samples from 17 different worlds. Their work was already being cited by scientists across the galaxy. "You were right," Kira Thess told Jake one evening as they sat in their small apartment overlooking the lights of New Geneva. "Marriage should be a choice. But more than that, life should be a choice." "Do you ever regret leaving your home?" Jake asked. "I miss my family, and I miss the Crystal Gardens. But I do not regret choosing freedom, and I know that because of what we did, other women will have the same chance to choose." She was right. Back on Viridian Prime, the first class of female students had just graduated from the newly established Academy of Sciences. Lady Cyrillin had become the Empire's first female starship engineer. The reforms to marriage law had passed, giving women the right to own property and refuse unwanted marriages. But the changes went beyond the Zephyrian Empire. The story of Jake and Kira Thess had inspired reform movements on dozens of worlds. The Galactic Council had passed new resolutions strengthening individual rights. Species that had never questioned their traditions were now having conversations about freedom and choice. A year after their wedding, Jake received a message that made him smile. It was from Commander Vexhorn, who had become an unexpected supporter of the marriage reforms. "Captain Morrison," the message said, "I wanted you to know that I have found a new path. I am no longer interested in arranged marriages or forced partnerships. I have met someone who shares my interests in military history, and we are choosing to court each other freely. You taught me that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from respecting them. Thank you for that lesson." But perhaps the most important change was happening quietly, in families across the galaxy. Parents were talking to their children about their dreams and ambitions. Young people were asking questions about their futures. The idea that everyone deserved the right to choose their own destiny was spreading like ripples in a pond. One evening, as Kira Thess worked late in her laboratory studying samples from a gas giant's moon, she received a communication from a young Zephyrian woman she had never met. "Lady Kira Thess," the message said, "my name is Vera Lynn. I am 16 years old and my parents want to arrange a marriage for me next year. But I have heard about your story, and I want to ask you something. Is it really true that I can choose my own future? Is it really possible for someone like me to become a scientist?" Kira Thess smiled as she recorded her reply. "Dear Vera Lynn, yes, it is true. You can choose your own future. It might not be easy and you might have to be brave, but it is possible. And if you need help along the way, there are people who will support you." As she sent the message, Kira Thess thought about the girl she had been just 1 year ago. That girl had felt trapped and hopeless, with no choices and no future beyond an unwanted marriage. Now she was a scientist, a researcher, a free woman who could choose her own path, and she was helping others find their own ways to freedom. She looked out the window at the stars and thought about all the worlds out there, and all the people who were just beginning to discover that they had choices too. It had started with one human who refused to accept that someone should be forced into a loveless union. Now it was becoming a revolution of hope that was spreading across the galaxy, and it was only the beginning.